And we are back playing guessing games with the Calgary Flames, but this time we have a fun little twist.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmosto. Thank you so much for joining me here today. And as always, I am joined by my partner in crime, Nick Zararis, who is hopping straight from his podcast, Liberty Blue Pod, to join us here while we talk about a less exciting but still very intriguing team. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm very glad I came up with this idea because I was a little worried what we were going to talk about today.
Yeah, I didn't know. When you texted me saying you had a fun idea, I was worried we were going to have to start comparing them to animals or TV show characters.
That's July.
Yeah, I was going to say that is after free agency. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss a show. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. Your team every day. Nick, would you like to explain this concept?
I would like to give a shout out to Julian McKenzie of The Athletic, who had this question in his mailbag and inspired and extrapolated out this idea. Tentatively, this new arena is supposed to open in the fall of 2027. That is a very long time from now. That is a significantly long time from now in the context of hockey. We talk a lot that organizations will turn over a seventh of their organization every year at the draft. You're allowed 50 contracts. You draft 7 people. If you start with 7, you can have more. But generally speaking, it takes a little while to turn over a roster. And Craig Conroy is in the early stages of this turning the roster over and molding it into what his vision of what the Flames should be. And he's got a small army of draft picks and prospects to try and enact that vision.
Yes, and we are going to kind of break down our ideas of, the long term, the more than likely leaving between now and when the arena opens the doors, and the ones that will not be here. That we can probably put money on not being here come opening night of the new arena. I don't know what we're calling it, but I
don't think it has naming rights yet, so I think we're okay so far.
The Flames' next home.
Yes.
So long-term planning. Are you thinking who will be here?
So I wanted to open it up a little bit more broadly before we start talking specific players. The idea behind long-term planning, and this is something we talked about a few weeks ago, the idea that you got to be building the roster going forward in your head. It's not just about right now. It's not just next season. It's who can I get here that can be here for an extended period of time and give me value or excess value of what they're being paid. That's the foundational principle you should have in trying to build your roster. A lot of the time when teams get into trouble, it's because they're trying to build their roster for one specific thing, whether it be right now, the next season, or long term. That's how you end up mired in the infinite rebuild. Is anytime you got a good player, you trade them for more futures because you can't build a good team around them. The Arizona, the Buffalo, the Ottawa dilemma. And then on the other hand of things, when you start pushing too many things into the middle and trying to get too good too fast, that's where you can kind of mess your arc up. I was talking about this over the weekend with one of my friends. He asked me what happened to the Kings. They were playing so well in December, up till December. And now, they're going to make the playoffs, but their trajectory looks a little bit different. And I think part of that is they thought they were closer than they are. So they pushed a lot in to get Pierre-Luc Dubois, and it just hasn't really clicked. That's not to say it can't. He's still got 7 years on that contract, but generally speaking, you get into trouble when you're trying to do too many things at once.
Yeah, it's too many chefs in the kitchen, but just in hockey, I think the Kings are a great example of this because, I mean, we're watching it unfold in real time, and it's not like you have to call back to anything. And again, no rebuild, retool, is perfect. It doesn't have directions. There's no recipe for success. You can't preheat the oven and put it in for 25 minutes and have a nice cake. Not how this works. But we do have some important pieces here in Calgary for a very long time.
Yes. And this is something I talked about a lot over the last few weeks going into the deadline. It is important that they have these transitional guys that are going to be here when the roster might be a little lean and they have a lot more young guys who don't have as much experience in the lineup, That does matter. I think some teams put a little too much stock in that. I think there's an argument that you can pay for good older players as opposed to just older players. And I do think that's an issue that teams run into at times, that they value experience as opposed to the value a player actually brings, especially in hockey more so than in the other sports. Hockey's the only sport where where a depth guy, like the one that always comes to mind is the Canucks signing Jay Beagle the summer the Capitals won the Stanley Cup. Like, Jay Beagle was a fourth line center playing 13 minutes a night. Did you think bringing him to your team that was woefully deficient defensively was going to magically fix your team defense? The Rangers feeling that they got bodied by Tom Wilson, so bringing in Ryan Reeves and Sammy Blais was going to make the entire team tough as opposed to having one or two individual tough guys. Again, that speaks to the idea of it's not just about right now. Part of the reason teams run into trouble is because they worry too much about building their roster right for this moment, or they keep indefinitely saying, well, we're not ready to compete yet, so we got to trade this guy because he's going to be expensive, and there's no point in paying a player, words are hard, paying a player to not be on our team. I mean, not playing a player to be good on a not good team. There we go.
Sure. Yeah. I think that, there's just so many ways to operate and navigate this. And players like Kadri, like Huberdeau, like Weegar, like Backlund are all so important to this team. And there was a 7-player meeting last week regarding leadership or the leadership group in the room. And I think that it's important for those guys to, all be on the same page. And I think we've seen that. I don't feel like there is this rift in the room or anything like that you might have felt a few years ago. But it definitely feels like, and I know we talk about it, like the vibes a lot, and we are just outsiders. We do not know what is actually going on, but it just feels a lot lighter than it did at the start of the season when you had, at that point, 5 unsigned pending UFAs, and now the job is done.
I think you can... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's March. We have reached a point where I think, they're comfortable.
I think the biggest thing is that they understood kind of what they were up against.
Mm-hmm.
They came into the season with an understanding that if we don't come out of the gate strong, we're going to sell. And you saw the reason I would say the vibes are better this year than they were last year is that little pocket right after the deadline where they went on the nice little win streak, where they pulled off some nice wins, where they beat Pittsburgh on Kiprusoff night,
Mm-hmm.
Those types of little things where everything's not great. We know these are less than ideal circumstances, but teams that are poor, that don't have good culture, that don't have that kind of a positive environment that guys are excited about, they don't play above their weight for that long. Teams that have rancid vibes, they don't rattle off 5 or 6 wins in a row. They went 7-3-0 in February. I know I keep pointing to that, but that's nothing to sneeze at considering how light this roster is on talent. That matters. If you're going to play above your weight, you need strong culture, and it feels like the Flames have strong culture, and the results will tell you that.
Yeah, and just one last thing before we move on. It's not like they were playing bottom of the barrel teams either. They came back from the All-Star break and pretty much played contenders. So again, it's all relative. But coming up next, we are going to dip our toes into the less likely players. So I would say like the second outer ring of who will not be here, coming up right after this. But first, I want to talk to you about Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood is the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into today's episode of Locked On Flames. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well, because this is the beginning. We have spent most of the season kind of laying the foundation for the next few seasons, and it's kind of nice, like, to see where the Flames are at, because right now I'm not... like, as a fan, I'm not upset. I don't want to burn the locker room to the ground like I did last year. But it's also like, okay, we're missing the playoffs. But there's a good reason for it.
There's a plan. You know, we spent all of last year with the looming decisions of the coach, the general manager, and quite a few guys on the team. All of that lingering over the organization. They didn't have a clear direction of, are we trying to be competitive? Are we going to reset? Are we going to blow it all up? And it happened. You know, the first step in solving any problem is acknowledging there is a problem. Yeah. The Flames it took them a little while to get there, but they understood, at least Craig Conroy has understood, they are in a position where if they were going to keep everybody, their ceiling was 8th best team in the West. And if you want to seriously contend, your path needs to be making the playoffs pretty much every season, and you need to be tinkering around the edges of your core, trying to maximize what those guys are good at to eventually start winning things. And it's a long road. You know, we talked about it after the deadline, kind of looking at the rubble as it cleared. They didn't get any blue chip guy who's definitely going to be a first liner or a first pair D man. They got some interesting pieces, some guys who have potential, but a lot of this is ultimately going to come down to development and talent identification. You know, the guys they draft are going to be the bulk of what they have to show for this deadline. And that's on your scouting. You know, if they can scout well, maybe they are able to turn this around a little bit faster than we think.
And hopefully that is the case, because I don't think anyone wants to kind of be watching this kind of hockey for an extended period of time. But we're talking 3 seasons from now.
Tentatively, yes.
Yes. As long as things go as planned, which we know typically does not happen when it comes to arenas or really anything in life. Mikael Backlund, his contract is up at the end of next summer. He'll be 36. Is he going to still be here?
I think Backlund probably sticks around for the opening of the new arena because he'll want to, he'll want the one last moment as the captain. That unless they have somebody they've identified that they prefer, that they would like to be captain in 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a reasonable chance Backlund keeps rolling 1-year contracts into his late 30s if he keeps playing well. That would make sense. That's something we've seen the Kraken do with Jordan Eberle, where a lot of people thought they might trade him, but they gave him a 2-year extension, and he's in his early 30s, and he may or may not be named captain going forward into this new period, or as they kind of transition into what that team's going to be long term. That matters, the sustainability at your leadership position. You don't want to have turnover at captain because your captaincy is supposed to mean something. So I think Backlund probably stays.
Yeah. And plus, I think, I don't know, it's significant. It's monumental. This is something that he's probably wanted for most of his career. It's a new home, but still in Calgary. Who do you think might be on the outs at that point?
So, all right, let's split this up because there's a lot of people. So on the way out, I think it's reasonable to assume that Blake Coleman, who is 32, will probably be traded to a contender at some point in the next season or two. Because if you retain money and you get his 4.9 down to 2.45, he becomes infinitely more valuable to a team that's trying to compete. And then he retires. He would be 34, 35. He'd be over 36. And then at that point, if he wanted to keep playing, he could do the over 35 incentive-laden contracts. And then, Chillington, I think we'll know by this offseason based on the type of contract he gets. But other than that, Markstrom probably not on the team at that point, because even if he stays the rest of his contract, he would be an unrestricted free agent going into that season, into the 2027, 2028, and he would be 37 going on 38 years old. So unless he's a backup, I don't see a world where Markstrom's probably on the team.
Yeah, when you first brought this idea to me, my first two thoughts were Blake Coleman and Jacob Markstrom, and mainly because of this past deadline, and also Dustin Wolf's performance over the last few games. Blake Coleman would be a fantastic addition to any team, and we know that he has what it takes, and he's still proving that. Markstrom, even if, like you said, even if he sticks around for the rest of his contract, wouldn't blame him if, we call it a day. Just because 37, that's a lot.
That's a lot of miles as a goalie, man. Markstrom's played a lot over the last decade. And then, the guys on the bottom half of the roster, I don't think we have to go too in depth. Greer, Dryden Hunt, Walker Dewar, those type of Kevin Rooney, those types of guys who you need them to fill out the rest of your roster, but more likely than not long-term solutions. Same thing with the guys on the back end, whether it's Paco, whether it's Dennis Gilbert, Joel Hanley, a lot of those guys are just here because they got to fill out the bottom half of the roster.
Yeah, and hopefully by that point, the Flames are ready to graduate some players.
Yes.
Otherwise, we are still looking at a very big problem.
Yeah, no, when you're filling out your roster as a team that's kind of in the middle or worse, you're going to have guys you don't want in your lineup. That's just it. That is part of what makes the NHL so condensed, like the parity the NHL exists. It's because there's a lot of bad teams. It's not because everyone's good. It's because all of the good players are hoarded by a handful of teams. There's a reason the teams that go on the long playoff runs have 5 or 6 all-star, superstar caliber players. When you're, middle of the pack or worse, there's a reason you have guys who are, career AHLers or guys who have 200 career NHL games across 10 seasons. You're going to have, there are only so many good players to go around.
Right. And I mean, Nick DeSimone isn't on the team anymore, but prior to him being waived, he had a lot of NHL games at 29 years old and had, I think that was his first career goal as an NHLer earlier this season, I believe.
This is why we fact check. So Nick DeSimone is 29 years old. He has 30 career NHL games played. And the goal he scored this year, he has 4 career NHL goals.
Okay. No.
1 as a Flame, 1 as a Devil, and then 2 as a Flame last year. Yeah, okay. Because he went back and forth. Yeah. So he has 2 career NHL goals as a Flame.
Which, I mean, not great, but I mean, hey, he's
a career AHLer.
Yeah.
He got his moment, you know.
Yeah.
That puck will be on his mantle at his desk at whatever his job is after playing hockey. And you got the story, man. There's a reason the professional athletes do well and they're after their playing careers, because they have that built in. Yeah, I played professional sports.
Yeah. I don't know who I was thinking of then. Maybe it was Dennis Gilbert. I mean, no offense to them, but they kind of all blend together, because, you know, you're just a bunch of older defensemen. But I think it's going to be a testament in like 2 years to see who's ready to graduate.
That's ultimately one of the signs of a healthy organization, how well you graduate your AHL guys.
And we will talk about who the Flames might kick to the curb, or who might walk freely. Coming up next here on Locked On Flames. But first, I do want to take a quick break and talk to you about FanDuel. Say goodbye to your busted bracket, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Nick, will you be placing any bets as the tournament March Madness kicks off?
Oh, no, don't bet on. I will not be betting on basketball. I will bet the under in a lot of Flames games down the stretch, because all of these games are going to be stinky.
Well, there we go. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, and whatever you would like. And you can pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Thanks, everyone, for hanging around with us today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you're following us on X at JustBallMosto and at Nick Zararis. My first player is Mangiapane.
Oh, yeah. Mangiapane will get traded to a contender probably next season. He's got this year. Yeah, he's an expiring UFA after next year. Almost certainly he will get traded to a contender at next year's deadline. He will be the Blake Coleman of next deadline, where Coleman got traded from the Devils to Tampa Bay, and then Tampa Bay went on the long run. You drop Mangiapane on the third line of a good team, that's a great team. You drop him on a second line of a good team, it's a decent team. You know, in an ideal world, if you're genuinely a Stanley Cup contender, Mangiapane's on your third line and you have a really deep team. He can play top 6, but he's really good if you can match him up against other teams' bottom 6 guys.
Yeah, we've definitely seen, I would say, a significant difference between when he's playing those top 6 minutes versus when he's on that Coleman and Backlund line. What about Rasmus Andersson? Because his contract is expiring 2 seasons from now, I believe, and he's creeping up there, but he is also the heartbeat of this team in many circumstances. Are they trading him?
It depends. I know that's not a satisfying answer, but I think it depends where they're at. You know, like you said, he's got 24, 25, and then 25, 26 under contract. He is 27 years old. He will be 29 going on 30 when he will be an unrestricted free agent. The prudent thing to do would be to keep in mind where you're at. You know, if you feel like you're ready to take a step forward 2 years from now and you think you can be competitive and you want to keep him because, as you said, he's the heartbeat, he's the motor, he keeps everything running. Okay. but that means you're ready to take a step. That's not we're on the fringes of being in the playoffs. That's we're good and we can't afford to let this guy go because that would be taking a step back. But more likely than not, based on what type of roster construction they're going to have to do over the next couple seasons, he probably does get moved at some point in the next 2 seasons because you get a really good return for him because there just aren't a lot of offensively inclined right-handed defensemen, and you need assets. If he's 29 going on 30, you're going to be buying his 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38 on the max contract term-wise he's going to want. That just, for a team that's probably not going to be a Stanley Cup contender, I don't think the logic bears out to give him that long-term extension if you're not ready. If the team's not that good, don't do that.
No, and that's, just kind of staying in the cycle of handing out lots of money for a very long time that we need to kind of branch out from. That it'd be nice.
It's what we need, man. You got to have a plan and you stick to it. You show conviction, and if you think you're rebuilding, you're rebuilding. Don't go spending money on a bad team. That's one of the issues teams will run into is where they're in that soggy middle and they want to go for a playoff spot, and they'll add useful players like. It's a bad example because they're playing well as of late, but if you look at what Nashville did last offseason, it did make a lot of sense. It's good. They're probably going to get in the playoffs this year, but you look at that roster and it's old, it's expensive, and there's not really a pipeline of guys other than Askarov kind of in the wings waiting to kind of assume an important role. So it's a bad example, but there are a lot. The Islanders, for example, the Islanders were meh last year. They traded for Bo Horvat, who's a good player, but he's one guy on a meh team. There's not a whole lot he's going to be able to do. So I think that's really the concern and why you kind of have to consider moving on from those older guys.
Well, we won't throw any gasoline on these fake trade rumors that we are starting a year in advance, but Dustin Wolf is pending RFA this summer. Yes. Am I correct to assume he will still be here?
I think that's the plan. I think that's what they envision going forward, but if he doesn't pan out or they have the opportunity to get someone better, that's certainly possible, but I think he is their plan. He's going to be cheap because he has no experience. He can't command a lot of money. He's not even arbitration eligible yet because he's only 22. So he's going to be very cheap for the next 2 seasons probably. And then they'll reassess it because that's what if I was his agent, I'd be pushing for 2 years, get to arbitration. And then, you hopefully have at least, I want to say 60 starts over 2 seasons. If you can get the math to check out the way you want to, tentatively, if you trade Markstrom and you do 1A, 1B with him and someone else next year, he's in the ballpark of 30, 35 games. So 60 over 2 years would be reasonable for a 23 and then 24-year-old. But if a better goalie becomes available or he just doesn't have it, then I think it's perfectly feasible to kind of hedge your bets. He doesn't have a traditional development curve, as a late round pick, that much time in the AHL, he's an outlier. So it's perfectly possible he's an outlier and he is good at the NHL level. But at the same time, there's a reason we look at statistics. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, again, it is still very early in his NHL career. There were conversations 2 weeks ago about how he's too small to play in the NHL. And then he wins these few games and he is suddenly the best goalie in the NHL. And it's a spectrum. And you just got to keep riding the wave. There is no easy answer to any of this. And it's going to be quite the time to be a fan of this team, to cover this team, to watch what they do and watch how Craig Conroy approaches the rest of this.
Craig Conroy doesn't even know what the team is going to look like 3 years from now. No one does. There's a chance Conroy's not even the GM 3 years from now. So it's kind of, this is a good thought exercise. It gets the juices flowing, but ultimately, a lot of this is going to be determined by how guys develop and how the team is. Maybe they're the Flyers of next year, where they come out of nowhere and they're good, and that kind of speeds up everybody's mental process of what they think the team should look like. Anything is possible. It's why they play the games. You can't say anything authoritatively, especially in hockey.
Yes, and maybe don't buy a jersey with a name on the back of it for a little bit, unless
you
it's
can buy Connor's Aries. That's the only one I would think I would say is safe.
Good call. But that will do it for us today on today's episode of Locked On Flames. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. You can follow us on Twitter at Just Belmosto and at Nick Zararis. And Nick, do you have any parting words for us today?
I'm getting tired of looking at Cap Friendly, bro.